Well, when I think of Sweden, I tend to think of IKEA, maybe a Volvo, but not genderless babies. You remember that story out of Toronto a little while ago, genderless babies. Well, now this craze has moved on to Sweden, where a daycare center has dropped him, her, his, hers. No, you can't use that anymore. And they've got to find ways to get around words that, policeman or doctor, even doctor, could be too male. So now they're using hen to describe everything. It's a made-up word, but it's an attempt to say they're not going to discuss gender here. Gender has no role. It's a social construct. That's the thing I hear about often, social construct. I'm not sure what that means. I think that's made up. Dave Quist from the Institute for Marriage and Family Canada joins us now. Dave, your group has studied the daycare system in Canada. You deal in family issues. So I want to ask you about will this sort of thing come here? But first, as a man that's raised two children, that has studied family issues, is there going to be any fallout from this with children that are told boys and girls aren't different, there's no difference between them?
Well, the old adage of sugar and spice versus puppy dog's tails, I guess that adage is gone. Sure, there's a difference between boys and girls. Boys and girls are different on many different levels. What they're trying to do is they're trying to confuse social outcomes versus biology. And little boys and little girls are always going to be little boys and little girls. They're going to grow up differently. They're going to react to mums and dads and teachers and doctors and hen, as we've been told now, in very different ways. And the idea that we can simply be gender neutral and expect everything to be perfectly fine is social engineering at its worst.
We've heard in the past about teachers and daycares trying to say, well, we don't want to have boy toys and girl toys and just go for gender neutral toys, and that's often failed, as boys will turn just about anything into a gun.
Absolutely.
Let's say. But I was speaking to a friend a little while ago that works up on Parliament Hill, and he'd saved all his Hot Wheel cars from when he was a boy and thought, I'll let my kids play with these. Was all excited. He and his wife have only girls, gives the girls, when they're old enough, Hot Wheels cars to play with. Instead of racing them the way boys would, they grouped them into families. And there was the yellow car family and there was the black car family.
Sure.
And he said it was fascinating watching them play, but to them they weren't cars. It was just another way to play a family game or organization game. He said vastly different.
Right. I think anybody that has been around children, whether they're their own children, whether they've been around a playground or a nursery school or young kids or so on, you're absolutely right. I mean, little boys, if they don't have access to a gun or a truck, will turn a stick into a gun and a rock into a truck as they push dirt around the sandbox and things like that. Little girls traditionally will often group things together, and they'll play house and they'll do other things. There's nothing wrong with those things. Should we force them to play those particular roles? No, we don't need to do that. But
my experience is they do it on their own.
They're going to do it on their own, exactly right. We shouldn't be trying to say gender neutral, because little boys are going to be little boys. There's exceptions. Little girls will sometimes want to play with the cars and trucks, and there's nothing wrong with that either. Little boys will sometimes want to do some of the softer things in life, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes we wish some little boys would do that a little bit more, because they sometimes rough and tumble just a little bit too much.
Please be quiet. This is what I'm thinking on a Sunday afternoon or a Saturday afternoon. Please just be quiet.
Dad's trying to have a half-hour nap or something like that, exactly. But boys and girls are going to be like that. There's something genetic in them. There's something, one thing is called epigenetics, where the part of our DNA is actually triggered by external factors. And so dads and moms will trigger certain things in boys differently than girls. And as we grow up, that's what causes us to be us. That's the uniqueness of boys and girls as well.
Now, this is happening in Sweden right now, this gender-neutral daycare. Do you think it will stay there? Or will this sort of thing come to Canada? Is it already here?
Certainly the early precursors of it already here. We heard about the young child in Toronto that is being raised in a genderless family in that sense, that they're not going to tell us the world of is this a boy or a girl. We often hear about the social utopia of Sweden, that if we could just do things like Sweden, that things would be wonderful. At our last conference, we had somebody from Sweden that's done some research there, and he said completely the opposite. Things are not going well for young children.
There's a detachment between parents and their children, is what I remember that talk being about.
Absolutely right, and that young mums who are wanting to stay home with the children are literally being forced back into the workforce by the state, by the society, and there's a higher rate of depression amongst those young mothers that want to stay and raise their own children. I think there's a yearning within all of us that we want to see our children raised the best. They're not being given that option. So is that trend going to come here? No doubt there'll be some that will want to bring it here. Will it have a good outcome? I don't believe so, no.
Here's one of my thoughts on where this will go, because I think it will come here. I think the genderless thing within an organized structure will come here. And if we end up with the government-run daycare system expanding beyond Quebec, the feds have said no right now. Doesn't mean the provinces can't do it. We will end up with something along the lines of Dalton McGuinty, the Ontario Liberal Premier, and his sex ed program that he wanted to bring in until parents heard about what was in it and how graphic it was. That would be extended, because McGuinty is bringing this back, as ministers have said. They're bringing it back. That kind of stuff will be shoved all the way down to daycare. And saying get rid of gender will be part of it.
I think you're absolutely right. The same thing was actually tried in Alberta a couple of, maybe 18 months ago or so as well. And the same thing there. Parents rebelled. Parents know what's in the best interest of their children. And teaching explicit sex education at such a young age is not in their best interest in whatsoever. The outcomes of that are poor at best. They're negative across the board. And so when parents actually hear what's going on and take the interest and have the opportunity to speak out against it, they will say, no, Premier, we're not going to go that particular direction. Will it still be imposed upon society at large? I believe that there will be elements that will. There'll be some daycares that will try it, and some parents will think it's a wonderful idea. My opinion is that it's not going to have good outcomes. It's not in the child's best interest. We need to let little boys be little boys, little girls be little girls. There's some great little girls that grow up to be engineers and doctors and carpenters, and that's great. There's some little boys that grow up to be designers and work in areas that traditionally we thought of as being female roles. Nothing wrong with that at all. But we shouldn't be forcing gender-neutral social construct on kids at such an early age, forcing them to think in a different way altogether.
All right, Dave Quist, thank you very much.